Hi, my name's Trish Roberts and you're listening to LiveVegan. This is podcast number 21, and I wanted to share this column article by Chris Hedges, who writes for Truthdig, and it's called "This Time We're Taking the Whole World with Us." It was posted on March 7th, 2011. I have walked through the barren remains of Babylon and Iraq and the ancient Roman city of Antioch, the capital of Roman Syria, which now lies buried in silt deposits. I have visited the marble ruins of Leptis Magna, once one of the most important agricultural centres in the Roman Empire, now isolated in the desolate drifts of sand southeast of Tripoli. I have climbed at dawn up the ancient temples of Tikal, while flocks of brightly coloured toucans leapt through the jungle foliage below. I have stood amid the remains of the ancient Egyptian city of Luxor along the Nile, looking at the statue of the great Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II lying broken on the ground, while Percy Shelley's poem Ozymandias running through my head. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of the colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Civilizations rise, decay, and die. Time, as the ancient Greeks argued, for individuals and for states is cyclical. As societies become more complex, they become inevitably more precarious. They become increasingly vulnerable. And as they begin to break down, there is a strange retreat by a terrified and confused population from reality, an inability to acknowledge the self-evident fragility and impending collapse. The elites at the end speak in phrases and jargon that do not correlate to reality. They retreat into isolated compounds, whether at the court of Versailles, the Forbidden City, or modern palatial estates. The elites indulge in unchecked hedonism, the accumulation of vaster wealth and extravagant consumption. They are deaf to the suffering of the masses, who are repressed with greater and greater ferocity. Resources are more ruthlessly depleted until they are exhausted. And then the hollowed-out edifice collapses. The Roman and Sumerian empires fell this way. The Mayan elites, after clearing their forests and polluting their streams with silt and acids, retreated backwards into primitivism. As food and water shortages expand across the globe, as mounting poverty and misery trigger street protests in the Middle East, Africa, and Europe, the elites do what all elites do. They launch more wars, build grander monuments to themselves, plunge their nations deeper into debt, and as it all unravels, they take it out on the backs of workers and the poor. The collapse of the global economy, which wiped out a staggering 40 trillion in wealth, was caused when our elites, after destroying our manufacturing base, sold massive quantities of fraudulent mortgage-backed securities to pension funds, small investors, banks, universities, state and foreign governments, and shareholders. The elites, to cover the losses, then looted the public treasury to begin the speculation over again. They also, in the name of austerity, began dismantling basic social services set out to break the vast vestiges of unions, slashed jobs, froze wages, threw millions of people out of their homes, and stood idly by as we created a permanent underclass of unemployed and underemployed. The Mayan elite became, at the end, as the anthropologist Ronald Wright notes in A Short History of Progress, quote, extremists or ultra-conservatives squeezing the last drops of profit from nature and humanity, end quote. This is how all civilizations, including our own, ossify and die. The signs of imminent death may be undeniable. Common sense may cry out for a radical new response, but the race towards self-immolation only accelerates because of intellectual and moral paralysis. As Sigmund Freud grasped in Beyond the Pleasure Principle and Civilization and Its Discontents, Human societies are as intoxicated and blind by their own headlong rush toward death and destruction as they are by the search for erotic fulfillment. The unrest in the Middle East, the implosion of national economies such as those of Ireland and Greece, the increasing anger of the beleaguered working class at home and abroad, the growing desperate human migrations, and the refusal to halt our relentless destruction of the ecosystem on which life depends, are the harbingers of our own collapse and the consequences of the idiocy of our elite and the folly of globalization. Protests that are not built around a complete reconfiguration of American society, including a rapid dismantling of empire and the corporate state, can only forestall the inevitable. We will be saved only with the birth of a new and militant radicalism, which seeks to dethrone our corrupt elite from power, not negotiate for better terms. The global economy is built on the erroneous belief that the marketplace, read human greed, should dictate human behavior and the economies can expand eternally. Globalism works under the assumption that the ecosystem can continue to be battered by massive carbon emissions without major consequences. And the engine of global economic expansion is based on the assurance that there will always be plentiful and cheap oil. The inability to confront simple truths about human nature and the natural world leaves the elites unable to articulate new social, economic and political paradigms. They look only for ways to perpetuate a dying system. Thomas Friedman and the array of other propagandists for globalization make as much sense as Charlie Sheen. Globalization is the modern articulation of the ancient ideology used by past elites to turn citizens into serfs and the natural world into a wasteland for profit. Nothing to these elites is sacred. Human beings and the natural world are exploited until exhaustion or collapse. The elites make no pretense of defending the common good. It is, in short, the defeat of rational thought and the death of humanism. The march towards self-annihilation has already obliterated 90% of the large fish in the oceans and wiped out half of the mature tropical forests, the lungs of the planet. At this rate, by 2030, only 10% of the Earth's tropical forests will remain. Contaminated water kills 25,000 people every day around the globe, and each year some 20 million children are impaired by malnourishment. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now above 350 parts per million, that most scientists warn is the maximum level for sustaining life as we know it. Editor's note: the preceding sentence has been revised since the article was first published here. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change estimates that the measurements could reach 541 to 970 parts per million by 2100. At that point, huge parts of the planet beset with overpopulation, droughts, soil erosion, freak storms, massive crop failures, and rising sea levels will be unfit for human existence. Jared Diamond, in his essay The Last Americans, notes that by the time Hernan Cortes reached the Yucatan, millions of Mayan subjects had vanished. Why, Diamond writes, did the kings and nobles not recognize and solve these problems? A major reason was that their attention was evidently focused on the short-term concerns of enriching themselves, waging wars, erecting monuments, competing with one another, and extracting enough food from the peasants to support all these activities.